Yesterday, a really wonderful colleague of mine was telling me about her final plans for her wedding, which is happening in just a couple of weeks. She told me about the table settings, accommodations she'd made for her in-laws, for toddlers, for people with allergies, the plan for the bridal photos, everything. And at some point, I gently leaned over and I was like, where are you in all of this? It's your day, and how can you make sure you're present and soak up all this love and send it back to the most important people in your life? And then this morning, I realized that's basically what Allison is leaning over and gently telling us in Nothing Fancy. On every page and in every recipe, she reclaims the pleasure and the presence of the host and reminds us that bringing friends together is not a performance, but a shared experience. There's a generosity and a sense of inclusion in every recipe in this book that we all desperately need right now. This grace extends to Allison's Instagram presence, and of course, her work with the New York Times and Bon Appetit, and of course, her best-selling book, Dining In. Every recipe from the stew, to the cookies, to the lemon cake, is something we're all working on together. It's imperfect, but it has love, and it's part of a process and not a finish line. But do not be mistaken. Underneath this flexibility, every recipe is airtight, impeccably tested, and malleable enough to beautifully exist in all its versions. And that puts Alison Roman at the forefront of food writing and food creation today. Allison will be in conversation tonight with Jessica Sidman. If you love food in DC, you've definitely encountered Jessica's writing, first in City Paper and now in Washingtonian, where her diverse cultural coverage can be found from an unforgettable long-form investigation on Mike Isabella to a guide on DC restaurants where you can actually bring your baby. Please help me welcome Jessica Sidman and Alison Roman.
That's very nice.
Wow.
Thanks, Allison, for being here. I heard this is the last stop on your book tour, and apparently it's the biggest crowd yet. So
Yeah.
Go DC.
Yes.
So I just want to jump in, I guess, to the real crux of the book. You don't like the word entertaining.
I don't.
You like having people over for dinner.
I do.
So what's the difference? How much of that is semantics? How much of that is an actual philosophical distinction?
I feel like it's mostly all semantics, but I feel like when I think about the things that relax me or stress me out, I realize it's semantics. Anyway, it's like just calling something different, like a different word, helps me feel better about something. Like, oh, I'm not going on a date. I'm just grabbing drinks with a person I've never met before. Like, you have to reframe it, and then I can feel comfortable with it. So I feel like entertaining feels like something scary and weird and uncomfortable and intimidating, but having people over feels casual. But in talking about it, through the book tour, I also realized that it's not necessarily about managing my expectations. It's also about managing your expectations. So when I ask you to come over on a Sunday, I'm not like, oh, I'm entertaining on Sunday. Would you please join me? That feels so weird. But if I say, oh, come over, I'm just having people over, and you accept that invitation, that can mean we're just having cheese and crackers and wine and 1,000 dips. Or I'm roasting 4 chickens and we're doing an elaborate situation. It can mean anything. And it just covers a lot of ground.
Well, there's so many books that will lay out guidelines and etiquette rules for hosting a dinner party.
I don't know any of those rules.
Is there any particular rule that if you could do away with it forever, it just needs to go?
Honestly, I don't, I genuinely don't know the rules. So, I don't even know what they are to know what I wouldn't, acknowledge or abide. But I feel like knowing what I do know about older forms of entertaining, it just seems like something I was just never going to be interested in. And that confused me because I was a professional cook. So people were always like, oh, I bet dinner at your house is amazing. And you're so organized and have all the stuff. And I'm like, you have never been to my house. And I think that conflating being a professional cook with also being a perfectionist when it comes to hosting are two very different things. And there are plenty of wonderful hosts that cannot cook. My grandmother being chief among them. That was always the joke, is that she would do origami with napkins and carve things from vegetables, and it was very elaborate and it looked very impressive. And then you'd sit down to the food and it was awful. And no shade to my grandmother. She's a wonderful person. That just wasn't her forte, but it just kind of goes to show that you don't need to be, one or the other. They're not mutually exclusive.
Right. What were her dinner parties like? Did you take any tips from her, or what do you not do that
she never really had any dinner parties. It was mostly it was all family based. And then the two people that she's they're your aunt and uncle. And you're how am I related? And you're you're not, they're just your aunt and uncle. And we all have those people. A lot of aunts and uncles came over. Unclear if we're related. But it was, it was for her, I think, a performance piece. She wanted to be performative in her caring for other people. And she wanted to be thought of as a great hostess, but not necessarily a great cook. Whereas where I'm more concerned with being a better cook than a host.
Right. Well, I wanted to start with the thing that you write is the most important thing to any party, which is not wine, contrary to popular belief, although wine is important.
Yeah, unfortunately, I can't write a recipe for wine, so I had to come up with an alternative thing to say.
But cheese, which
cheese.
100% agree.
Yeah.
So tell me your ideal cheese scenario for having people
Yeah, and
over.
let me say that it's cheese because cheese is great. We all know that. But it's the thing that you don't have to do anything to. It gets people out of your kitchen, and it satisfies their need to constantly try to pick at what a thing it is that you're trying to make in the kitchen. That drives me insane. There are a few things that bothered me when I was working in a professional kitchen or whatever, and that I still can't let go. If I'm in the kitchen and I'm doing something, do not, under any circumstances, come in and try and take a thing, a piece of what I'm cooking or chopping or whatever, casually nibble on that carrot. I'm that is to be roasted and eaten later, and I will not have you snacking on it. And they're well, you did it. I'm I'm cooking it. This is my carrot, and I am entitled to do that. This is not your carrot yet. It drives me insane. So to be please go in the other room and enjoy the cheese hour, and that cheese hour could last 2 hours if things don't go well. But knowing that you have the security blanket of a cheese plate will go so far. Even if you're not planning on serving a cheese plate, I highly recommend always having an insane amount of cheese in your fridge at all times. A, because it's good to eat when you're hungry, but B, if you're shit, this is this brisket is not done. And you're it's time for a cheese plate, it's just a fail-safe thing.
Amen.
Yeah.
And your house snack is basically just
hunk of Parmesan.
A hunk of Parmesan with a knife stuck in it.
Yeah. And weirdly, it's funny that you brought that up because I feel discussing the cheese plate was actually, it's to me, totally encapsulates the whole book where I felt pressure to kind of, when I knew I was going to write this book, it's okay, well, I'm reinventing the word entertaining or I'm doing it on my terms. And I was am I really going to do an impressive looking cheese plate? Because that's not what I do. I have a friend who does that. That's his thing. He makes the cheese plates. We call him Cheese Boy. And it's his greatest passion in life. It's just not my passion. I'm very happy to just throw some hunks on a board and that's it. But I feel that philosophy is kind of sets the ground rules for everything else in the book of you don't have to artfully arrange and make a domino looking cascading cheddar wall. It can just be some hunks of cheese. And that's so delicious to eat. I don't need anything more than that.
Right.
I'm very low maintenance. I'm not at all.
What's better than a chunk of Parmesan?
It's a trick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and you say everyone should have their own house snack. And you also mentioned one of the dips in your book is one of your house snacks. So how could people go about, figuring out what is their signature item that every time people come over, they know you're going to have the hunk of cheese or whatever it is?
I think it's two ways. You either just decide you're like, this is my dip. This is my house dip now. I will be not taking requests. This is the dip I will be offering. And how like my like house dip like became what it is that every time I make it, people freaked out and they were like, I have to have this recipe. I have to like.
And you got to tell us what it is.
It's the labneh with sizzled scallion and chili or whatever. It can. Thank you. And every time I would make it, I would then get an email or a text later being like asking me for the recipe, or every time they would have me over, they'd be like, can we make the dip? And it wasn't like, can you bring the dip or I'm making the dip? It's can we make it? And I was like, what you mean is, can I come over and make it and you can watch me and then like still not remember, but like act like it's a learning experience, but you're really just asking me to make you the dip.
Right.
Which I do. It's very easy.
And when people come over and they say, you know, what can I bring? What do you tell them?
This is a hot take, a hot topic. First of all, let me say that my attitude towards hosting is that if I'm hosting, then I feel like within reason to feel empowered to ask you to bring something. And that doesn't mean like half of my grocery list. It means that, oh, if I ran out of lemons, like, would you mind grabbing some on your way home? And I feel very spoiled because living in Brooklyn, I don't know what do you guys have bodegas here? That is the most Brooklyn question I could ask. They don't have bodegas in Los Angeles where I grew up. But so to ask somebody to pick something up on your way in LA is annoying because you're in your car and you have to drive and you have to park and it's like, ugh. But in New York, it's like, oh, there's a bodega on every corner. And I'm not going to ask you to bring something unless I know you can find it there. And you know what they have at bodegas is ice. And so, yeah, I am going to ask you to bring some ice. I have a very small refrigerator and an even smaller freezer, so I can't get it to fit in there. So it's not like I can order it ahead of time or take care of it. So it's the one thing that I always ask people to bring. They don't love it. But
you can never have
it's like
too much
a running
ice.
joke, I feel like. So it's like, oh my God, LOL, will you bring ice? And they're like, oh, you're asking me to bring ice. I hate you. So I think when asking somebody what to bring, like be mindful of how are they getting there? Do they have a child? Where are they coming from? How are they commuting? Is there a store nearby? Like I have friends where like I know they live near the good cheese place. So I'm like, yeah, can you pick up some of that ricotta? You know, like because I know that they're there. But I feel like not being afraid to ask what you can bring. It's not a sign of failure on your part.
Right. I think one of the other kind of stressful things for a lot of people, if you're having people over, is that everybody has some sort of dietary restrictions these days. There's the gluten-free friend and the person who doesn't like anchovies, heaven forbid.
I don't know those people. But yeah.
So how accommodating do you try to be?
I'm very fortunate, and I would say that there is nobody in my life other than like one friend who has a pretty severe gluten allergy that I have to accommodate. Like, I feel like the people that I'm constantly having over, like, we all eat everything. But I get all these questions a lot because I know that that's not the norm. But my advice is to always, like, I feel like all of my recipes, and especially with the two books, like, there's a lot of stuff that just happens to be vegan or just happens to be gluten-free. Like, I don't think people need to buy a special book to, like, be like, oh, I have a vegan friend. I better, like, do some research. It's like, well, no, just, like, make the squash, but don't put the yogurt underneath or whatever. You know, like, you can feel empowered to make modifications. And if there are people that are coming over that do have that, I try to make sure that they don't feel catered to in a way that makes them feel bad. Like, I think oftentimes from what I gather, when people do have dietary restrictions, especially when they're health related, they feel like it's fussy for them to be like, oh, remember, I can't eat whatever. And I don't ever want to be like, here, Julie, here's your like separate dinner that I like went out of my way for. This is what we're eating. Like, have fun. Like, so I feel like just being inclusive and making sure that like everybody can eat everything. And if that means that I put yogurt on fewer things just to make it easier for that one person, that's fine. Or I'll put it on the side or whatever. Like, I think going out of your way to make the room feel comfortable is more important than like figuring out a new menu.
Right.
And feeling if something has meat in it, be like, what would this taste like without meat?
Right.
Or something, you know, like using your judgment.
And don't invite the person who doesn't like anchovies.
Yeah, but
I'm
also like if I'm inviting my person who has a gluten allergy, I'm not going to make pasta that night. Like, I'm just not. I'm not going to be like, here's your gluten-free pasta and here's our regular pasta. I'm like I'm just going to like roast a chicken because guess what's gluten-free? A chicken. And I think that people forget that. It's like, oh, I can just do everything normal and not eat the pasta. I'll eat the pasta later alone.
Right.
So, you know.
So, I mean, I think it's one thing, you know, when you're having people over on any given Friday night, we also have the holidays coming up, which seems like a lot of added pressure if you're cooking. Mm-hmm. Do you have any tips, or do you modify your approach in any way when it is kind of that meal that people are looking forward to all year long and it's so iconic?
Yeah. I have a pretty iconic Christmas Eve.
Okay.
So it's like an annual party that my friend and I co-host at his place, and it's for anyone that's in town for the holidays. And it can be 12 to 20 people. And it is lit. This party is like so intense and insane. And he's a really great cook and loves like bigger project type things where I'm like, no thanks. But we work well together in that regard. And so we have a literal spreadsheet this year about like the menu, and we've been talking about it for weeks. There were like 40 emails before we got to the spreadsheet portion. But we're doing a feast of the 7 fishes minus 1 fish plus a lamb. So that is going to be and we're very excited. But I think like for those types of events, for me, it's the most fun to kind of be like, what's our theme? And I don't mean theme in like, we're all going to like wear Hawaiian shirts or something. I mean theme in that like, let's come up with one sort of cohesive vibe. Mm-hmm. And then we know what we're going for. And then like that way, when people do say, what can I bring? We're like, well, here's what we're working with. Here's our spreadsheet. And like, and you can kind of go from there, because my personal hell is a potluck. I'm sorry, it is, because you get like some crazy shit that none of it goes together. And it drives me insane. My brain cannot handle that. I've seen some bad ones. They're not all bad. I feel like when you're cooking, not necessarily this book, but this book is good too. But like when you're cooking from a book, or you're like, picking a theme like that, and it's a potluck, my blessings. But I feel like when it's just all bets are off, bring whatever you want, that's just a disaster to me.
Right.
So I feel like making sure there are some parameters set and it's being accounted for.
Okay. Yeah. What other kind of themed?
Well, so the next night, which is Christmas, we're actually doing Hanukkah. And because the night before is going to be so intense for me, Reed, I will be so hungover the next day. And it's also like with like the family unit, they're also my friends, but like my cousins and all that stuff. And nobody can make a decision. And I feel like I end up shouldering a lot of the stuff at the last minute, partly because I like it, partly because I know we need to eat at some point. But this year I was like, I'm making latkes, and that is all I'm making. So if that's all we end up eating, great. Because I've signed up for the thing. I've committed. I'm going to bring all the fixins. It's going to be amazing. That's what I'm being responsible for. So I feel like also allowing yourself to opt out at certain points. If you're like, oh, I'm really stressed out because people are expecting all this stuff, just be like, can I do a little less? And so I found myself being like, hey, like, what are we going to make for Christmas? Like, should we do like a Jewish, like Hanukkah, like Eastern European steakhouse night? And he's like, yeah. I was like, I'm unavailable, actually. So I'll be bringing latkes and making them there. And whatever else you decide to do, I support you. But I had to be like, wait, that's crazy of you to offer that. So take a step back, reevaluate, and then commit to the thing and follow through.
Right.
Yeah.
So, you've been on the road for a long time, so I don't know how much you've been in the kitchen, but maybe you can tell us.
I actually think I forgot how to cook. I haven't made anything in so long.
The last time you were in the kitchen having people over, what did you make?
Oh God, I have literally no idea. Honestly, I think one of the last times I had people over was when I shot the video for Thanksgiving for the New York Times.
Yeah. How many times did you have Thanksgiving for that?
I had Thanksgiving. Well, that we just shot straight through. So that was just like a real time I made Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
And then the days before, we shot it for the newspaper. So we shot the stills. So I shot it. That was number 2. And then before that, maybe like 2 other times in like the testing phase. So I had around 4 Thanksgivings. So that way, like this year, I was in Canada for Thanksgiving. I had just come from London, and everyone's like, "Are you so sad to be missing Thanksgiving?" I was like, "What?" I was like, "Is it what? Oh, Thanksgiving? Yeah, no, I did that like 5 times already. I am all set." The one thing I do miss is stuffing, and I probably will make that when I come home.
But you can have that for the holidays.
Stuffing is a 365 dish in my house, so I don't need permission.
Exactly.
I don't need a holiday to make stuffing.
Exactly.
Although, like mashed potatoes, I still can't wrap my head around like eating any other time of year. Like I know people do it, but I'm never like, you know what this dinner needs is a mashed potato. It's just not.
Right.
So you are
a big baked potato fan.
I'm a crispy potato person, yeah, and mashed potatoes are just like the opposite of that. So
Right. Yeah.
It's too close to a pureed soup, which I also am not on board with.
Oh, you're not on board with the pureed.
Yeah.
The mouth feel.
Yeah, it's too soft. People are like, "Well, what if there's garnish?" I'm like, worse. I don't want garnish on my soup. Like, give me like chicken noodle or something, you know? Give me some stuff in there.
Exactly.
Give me like a pozole, you know?
Right. Well, and some of you give a lot of vegetables that are kind of underrated their due, whether it's celery or broccoli.
Yeah.
Is there anyone in particular that you think just gets a bad rap the most? And how would you kind of convert people to it? What's your ideal way?
I would say that like my legacy will be convincing people that cabbage is good or something, you know, like, thank you. Love cabbage in the front row over here. But yeah, I think that like most of the feedback I get, which thank you to the internet, is a constant loop of feedback. I feel like it's almost all positive. The things that people say most is like, I used to hate X and you showed me that I could love it. And that to me is like, there's not a better thing to hear. And that people have been like, anchovies is like an obvious one, but there's more often than not, it's a vegetable. And then just be like, I never liked green beans. And I'm like, it didn't even occur to me that could be a vegetable that you don't like.
Yeah.
But I think all it takes is like one bad experience of being like, no, thank you to this green bean. I don't want to cook those. Like I can't see how they would be delicious. And you know, having people, I think that the major difference I think between Dining and Nothing Fancy, like those 2 years between publication is like, there was like a level of trust built. So, and I think that is the only way to make a successful cookbook, especially is by earning people's trust. And people being like, well, I hate green beans, but if there's anyone that can make me like them, it might be Allison.
Right.
And I'm like, that's cool. I'm here for that. I also just really love vegetables in a very earnest way.
So
I think they're great. Yeah.
And you said cabbage is the thing that you would like to convert more people to.
Oh my God, cabbage is like, I'm trying to think if like cabbage was a person, but
they're kind of big Brussels sprouts, you know, like if you like Brussels sprouts.
But there's something, I'm shocked that Brussels sprouts became like the cuter vegetable. Like people, like Brussels sprouts were popular for a time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was when people were deep frying them and then like tossing them in like fish sauce caramel, like at every restaurant. But cabbage to me is like a more elegant Brussels sprout. And it's so delicious. And you can do so much with it.
How do you convert people to cabbage? What's your
I feel like
go-to?
The way that it is here, which to me I think is a very good base level cabbage recipe where you cook it, you quarter it, and then you sear it on both cut sides. So just that it's like really nice and caramelized and soft on the outside, but still kind of is pretty crunchy on the inside, and then baste it with brown butter and like anchovies because that's of course in that recipe. You can do it without, you could do capers, you could do a lot of things. But basically cabbage and butter together are so good, and then finishing it with just a ton of lemon juice. So I call it just cooked cabbage just because it's just cooked, as in like it's not fully cooked.
Right.
It's just cooked, like just al dente, like not just cooked, like that's all it is. But like, you know, just cooked. Yeah.
Nice.
Note the distinction in my voice. Yeah. I hope that comes across on the page.
Well, so, I mean, you have some very iconic recipes that have reached kind of this single name Beyonce status. The salted chocolate cookies that are now just the cookies, and the chickpea stew that half my office brings into lunch every day. It's a stew. If there is a recipe from this book that you would hope would be kind of the next single word.
I never hope that for any of my recipes, because to me, then it just makes me anxious for the rest of them. Like if it every time it happens, I'm like, shit, like, does that mean I have to do it again? Like, I don't know if I can. And I kind of assume that every time it happens, it's the last time. And to be honest, I don't know that I'll ever, like, I think the cookies and the stew were both specific, unique, beautiful stars. And I don't think that no matter how popular like a book I write or I get or whatever like happens in 5 to 10 years, I don't know that anything like that can happen again, just because the way that happened, it was so specific. It hadn't happened before. I don't think the stew could have happened without the cookies. So even though I'm pretty sure the stew is more popular than the cookies, I think to me the cookie is the more important thing, because to me it was the first. It was like the first time I'd seen that happen, and I think it set the stage for everything else to happen like after it.
Right.
So I'm happy if that's it. And it's funny because like it starts to happen occasionally, and like I realize how much time I dedicated to promoting those things at the time. Like I had like just gone through a breakup, so I'd spent a lot of time with my phone. It was just like, well, I guess I'm just gonna like spend my eternity with my Instagram now. So I was like really going for it. I had a lot of time on my hands. But like the energy that it takes to like feed that fire, to like see something happen, to promote it, because this is like a boring topic, because I think it's like really as it relates to Instagram, which I'm like, well, Instagram. But the way that it was before is like I had to screenshot everything and then like save them, like save the photos on my phone and then like dump them onto like a story. And now I have to like be so on top of it, because if it disappears in 24 hours. So if I'm not like glued to my phone and like creating a like funny, engaging story like with these things, I miss out on the opportunity within 24 hours. And so it's like, at a certain point, I was like, I'm spending so much time on my phone doing this, and I'm not writing, and I'm not cooking, and I'm not doing the things that I have to do in order for that to happen. And I had to also just like take a break from Instagram, because I feel like poisoning my brain.
Right.
But anyway, so I think that has actually changed like that for the worse. So.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So, and does it make you not want to cook those viral recipes anymore? Is it like the song you've played over and over again? No,
it's just more that like the work that it requires to like showcase that the popularity of something has shifted so dramatically, just based on what Instagram decided to do with their stories. Of being like no longer like, now we're going to just like have it be where you can't edit the thing, and like, you know, I could screenshot, but that, I don't know. It's like the whole thing.
Right.
Yeah. If I ever hire somebody to do that for me, I'll be like, you're my Instagram screenshot person now. But to answer your question, no, I don't think that there's like one particular thing. I hope that they all are successful. I would be happy if the book itself was just like the popular thing.
Okay. But surely there's one or two that
a lot of people are cooking a
that people have been sharing with you on Instagram.
Yeah.
What are you seeing people already
people are cooking
a lot of?
The lemony turmeric tea cake a lot.
Right.
And I think it's because it doesn't require a mixer. Like you can use mostly pantry ingredients. Anyone can do it. I feel like people are like, yeah, but can anyone do it? I'm like, anyone can do it. It really is pretty foolproof. And it's like nice and sunny and fun to look at.
Right.
Yeah.
And you're really into turmeric, which, it never really occurred to me to buy the root and, grate it. But, there's more than just there's powder.
There's a whole world. Yeah.
I know.
Yeah. My friend, we became friends like after she founded this company. My friend Sana, who owns Diaspora, which is a spice company, they started off just doing turmeric, and now they've kind of expanded. They have like, I think 3 or 4 other things now. But that to me, like, changed my perception of like what like a dried turmeric could be, because it really is so special and so delicious, and in my opinion a lot more flavorful than the fresh stuff. It's like one of the rare occurrences where like I don't prefer fresh to dried, because people are like, if I call for oregano in a recipe, people are like, fresh or dried? I'm like, I will never ask you to use dried oregano, like not ever. Like if you want to use it, if you enjoy that, then go for it, but I'd rather you not use oregano than use the dried. And like that, you know what I mean? You don't have to like substitute it for something.
Right. And I mean, so much food now also seems kind of built for Instagram? Obviously, you have a big Instagram presence, but I don't get the sense that you cook for Instagram. So, do you think about it at all, or how do you kind of balance that aspect of?
I actually don't think about it at all. I think of Instagram now as like a platform for me to be like, hey, I'm doing this event, or hey, I did this thing and you can read about it, or I published a new recipe, you can find it here, as more just like a blog. I'm a blogger now, actually. It's a blog. But instead of, I don't know, it's like morphed so much as like my life has morphed, and I feel less inclined to share deeply personal things on it just because like it feels very vulnerable and weird to have people see into your life. And also I'm sure most people don't care. Like nobody wants to see like a picture of like me and my sister hanging out. Like people want to see like a cheap pan chicken, you know? And I think that's just like a call that I made, that I was just going to kind of start to use it as like a professional account. And everyone's like, oh, you should have a personal account and a professional account. I'm like, it's too many accounts. I think I have the one, and I use Instagram for work. And that's how I kind of view it. I mean, it's obviously deeply personal, but I think that it's not something that I consider when developing recipes. Okay. I think that not any more than I have my whole life that I've been cooking, which is that I think food should be beautiful, but it's also that I think food is beautiful. And I think that like in this book and in all my recipes, I style all the food myself, which is just to say that I cook the food and then we photograph it. And so it's not made to look a certain way for Instagram or to like be especially beautiful. Not everything has to have like a green spriggy thing on it. And I think the thing that I just try to convey both in my books and in Instagram and whatever is like a sense of authenticity. And I think the only way to do that is just by being authentic and like actually cooking the thing and documenting it. And so people like, someone asked me in an interview, which I was like, please don't ask me that. They're like, how do you take a great Instagram photo? And I was like, I don't know. I was like, have like a good thing, like have a beautiful thing on I don't know. You know, right. And my advice was like, if it doesn't look good, don't take a picture of it. Like, we don't need to take a picture of everything. And she's like, yeah, I'm looking for something like more positive. And I was like, that's like all I got. But we're so obsessed with documenting everything. And it's like, oh, I like didn't take a picture because it looked bad. I'm like, good on you. We don't need to see that. Like, there's a lot of stuff that happens in my life that nobody wants to see. Like, don't need to take a picture of it. Don't need it. And I think that there's so much pressure to like put stuff out there constantly. Yeah. And again, like places like Instagram don't make that easy when they like, you're like, change your algorithm and you stop seeing people because they don't post as much. And it's like very bizarre. And it makes people feel bad for not feeding that insane beast. And I think that we should be okay with not feeding it as much and just like trusting that nobody's going to forget about us.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. We're actually going to start taking questions in a little bit. There are 2 microphones up front for anyone who wants to line up and ask a question. If you're on the balcony, sorry guys, but you got to come downstairs to these microphones. I know, it's a pain. And in the meantime, Allison, though, I feel like what people do love about your social media is that you are very opinionated. And there was kind of this meme sort of thing going around recently. Maybe you saw asking people to share their most controversial food take.
Yeah.
And there were just a lot of terrible answers. But I wanted to ask you what your most controversial food take is.
Well, my answer to that tweet was, I do this for a living. That's all. My whole life is controversial food opinions, and I'm constantly like saying them. So I felt like it was a bit like, where to start, you know? I don't know. I think that my opinions aren't controversial. They're just my opinions. And like, I think that, like, I don't know, is pureed soup is bad controversial? I don't know. Like, who's out here that's like, that's a lie, you know? Like, I don't know. Like, who feels that strongly about pureed soup? And I'm always like, bell peppers suck. And everyone's like, well, what about, yeah, they do suck. I'm like, I know. Like, I feel like my opinions, like, while opinionated, I'm not sure, like, are that I guess my most controversial food opinion is that, and this has started to change lately, which is, I feel like I'd be like becoming a woman or something. But like, I don't think burgers are that good, or sandwiches. Like, I'm not a burger person, and I'm not a sandwich
very
person.
Controversial, yeah.
But
I get a lot of
But
comments.
I do like the thin patty smash burger with like a ton of iceberg lettuce and raw onion and mustard and pickles. Like that I get down with. But otherwise, it's like, oh, let's go to this place. They have great sandwiches. I'm not ever like, oh, yeah, can't wait to go there. I'm like, I honestly would rather not. Yeah.
That's fair. That's fair.
No, but this place makes great I don't care. I don't want the sandwich. I don't like them that much. I like my food separate, not together.
All right, so don't ask her for sandwich recipes, guys. Let's start right here, black shirt.
Hi there.
Hi.
Fellow member of the small kitchen hive here, and I feel like there's a lot of pretense always of I have such a small kitchen, my life's a nightmare, I have so many mustards, but what do you love about having a small kitchen?
That's a great question. If you didn't hear, what do I love about a small kitchen? And this is also something that I learned in restaurants. It's a similar concept to any sort of profession, but if you have all day, you'll take all day. And it's if you have all the space, you'll take all the space. So working in professional kitchens, I worked pastry often, which they're we have this massive kitchen. Oh, and the pastry department is over here in the corner. It's actually a closet. I'm so sorry. So I was used to working in really small spaces, but it just taught you to work a bit smarter and figure out your storage in a way that you hadn't before. So I think it makes me really resourceful. I think that I use my space in a really smart way. And what I also love about it is that if I can succeed there, then I know that anyone working with anything slightly better is going to have a much better experience. So I know that I'm starting at the very base level, but I think it pushes me to be a smarter and more thoughtful cook and recipe developer.
All right, let's do over here.
Hi.
First of all, thank you for your service that you give to each of us, because I really appreciate it as a service. I think you brought much joy and beautiful scents and
thank you so much.
foods to our life through your work.
Thank you.
But my question, what do you consider when you're pairing different foods to herbs, and how do you choose which kind of herbs are going to go with what? What's kind of the basic thought process?
I feel my general formula is food plus herbs is good. I love herbs on everything, which is why oftentimes in recipes I'll say 1 cup of parsley, cilantro, or mint. I genuinely feel herbs in most combinations work really well with each other and with every food. There's certain dishes where I'm this will not be as good if you don't use cilantro.
Yeah.
But if you only have this is great with parsley, but if you have cilantro, it'll also be good. And the reason I like to do that is because I don't want you to feel you can't make something if you're because I do this all the time where I'm oh yeah, I have parsley. And I look in the fridge, I'm shit, it's not parsley. It's a different herb. And I don't want to feel I have to run out to go to the store, that my dish isn't going to be successful for it. But typically I would say parsley goes with everything, in my opinion. Cilantro goes with most things. And tarragon is a secret ingredient that when you use it, it really counts and makes things very special. And it's one of the herbs that is worth seeking out. And chives on everything. Thank you. Oh, also, and most mint isn't that good. When you eat the mint, you're it's not that minty. I don't know. There's something about the mint. Anyway.
Hi. Thank you so much for being here. So on my way here this evening, I had to go pick up my CSA down at Eastern Market. And the beauty of a CSA is you always have something new. And today's surprise ingredient were these face-sized rutabagas.
Wow.
And I'm curious if you have any ideas for me of what to do with my giant rutabagas, besides maybe roasting them and chopping them up like that.
Puree it into a soup. No, I don't know. Rutabaga to me is one of those mystery vegetables as well. I don't call for them often because I find they're hard to, they're not that available. But I'm a huge fan of CSAs, and I think that it diversifies our kitchens and makes us more interesting cooks for sure. But to me, the texture is similar to a celery root or a parsnip.
Okay.
But I would also be very curious. I think that when you roast them, they become very soft, and I feel they have a lot of water in them. So I don't know. It's weird and it seems I don't know. It feels not the right answer, but I almost want to peel it and steam it and eat it with lots of butter.
Great.
And flaky salt or something, and tons of herbs, almost an herby, rutabaga-y salad. But if you have other root vegetables, maybe cut it. Because going full rutabaga on your first time could not go well for you. You don't want to like write them off forever. So
Awesome. Thank you.
you're welcome. So excited for that. That's the first time I've ever said the phrase full rutabaga. Pretty pleased with that one.
Right here.
Hi.
Hi. So you're testing recipes all the time and making a lot of food. Are you able to serve that food to friends to make sure that it doesn't go to waste, or how do you kind of deal with the end product of a lot of recipe testing?
Yeah, that's also a great question, and I feel like is never talked about or addressed. I have neighbors that will always gladly take food from me. I order containers, like reusable containers, that I stash in my kitchen that I use to like quart up food and send people home with. Also, people in my neighborhood, friends that have had babies, things like that, things that can get frozen and delivered later, I do often. Also, when I'm testing in like the first rounds of testing, I don't test the full recipe. I test like a portion of it, knowing that like it can be easily doubled, or when my tester tests, she tests the full thing. Or I have people over. I feel like it's so funny because people are always like, what do you love to like make for people when they come over? Like, what's your favorite thing to cook at home? And I'm like, whatever it is that I'm working on. And I almost never make the same thing twice, because so often the reason I am having people over is because I've had a photo shoot and I need to get rid of the food, or I've been testing and I need somebody to eat the stuff. I hate wasting food. Compost alleviates some of the guilt when there are things that I can't give away. But storing, freezing, composting, giving away, donating. I can't really donate because the places that I do donate product to only take sealed foods, like canned goods, which I do. But yeah, like the finished product is tough. I also eat a lot. like straight up eat a lot of food. So yeah. Thank you so much. You're welcome.
I've never been this person, but I have two super quick questions. One is I recently moved from like a very spacious kitchen into a studio, and I have more things than fit into my kitchen. What are the things that you find that people have in like every kitchen that I could just not have, and just like get rid of?
You want like what should you have?
Yeah, like what to like downsize. Like I have got so much more stuff than I have space in my kitchen for.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like I tell people it's the same thing with your wardrobe. Like pick it up. Have you worn it in the past 6 months? If not, donate it. Like, Have you ever used that thing? You don't need it.
Right.
Like I'm sure you were like really pumped to get that, like whatever the hell that thing is. I don't know. Even have an example, because I cook with like sheet pans and a knife. I don't like. It's like you step into my kitchen. It's like you've gone back in time. There is no technology in here. Like my essentials are like a coffee grinder, a knife, skillets, both stainless steel and cast iron, sheet pans, at least two sizes of pot, like a tinier pot and like a Dutch oven or a heavy bottom pot, fish spatula, wooden spoon, whisk. I'm like a pretty bare bones basic person. And I find that everything that I have in my kitchen that somebody gave to me or sent to me, I get a lot of stuff. I'm like, oh, but I love it. It's like so cute. And I'm like, it's just taking up space and I never use it. Get it out of your kitchen. So it's like anything in your house. It's like basically Marie Kondo that.
Yeah. And the second super quick thing is, what recipe have you been like trying to develop and just have not been able to make it work?
It's been a while since that's happened, because now I manage my own expectations, and like I understand that like also if something's so challenging for me to do, like how the hell is anyone going to do it at home? Like if I'm like really struggling, and oftentimes it's the same with my writing. If things aren't working, I scrap it, and I either table it, I revisit it. There was one time I was trying to develop a cake that looked like, you know those big stick popsicles, the like pineapple, orange, swirl, cherry thing? I wanted to make an upside down cake that looked like that, with like pineapple and hibiscus and like blood orange. It was very complicated. And I was like, it's going to be so cool. And I just couldn't get it to work. And after like 6 times, I was like, yeah. I just didn't have the time anymore. Like I was on a deadline and I was like, this is taking up too much time. Maybe one day.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi. Thank you for coming to DC.
Of course.
So a lot of your recipes seem to feature bold and punchy ingredients and have bold and punchy flavors. And I feel like you're extremely confident around the kitchen, especially with so many different varieties of ingredients. That said, what's your least favorite ingredient to work with and why?
I don't favor sweet things. Like I don't use a ton of like honey, maple sugar, brown sugar in my recipes. If I do, it's like front and center. I'm like, these are sticky carrots that I'm gonna like drizzle with maple syrup and roast the shit out of, or like I'm gonna make like sweet potatoes with lots of maple syrup. Like I'm gonna make it a part of the dish. But when I read recipes where it's like a tablespoon of honey like whisked into a dressing, it's like not necessarily my vibe. I like my sweet food very separate from my savory food. I think there's a time and a place for like a salty sweet thing, especially with certain vegetables. But yeah, that's like not my favorite. There's certain things that I'll just never write recipes for because they're inaccessible. But also by and large, I don't write recipes for things that I don't like eating. Like the way that I come up with the table of contents is I literally sit and think, what do I want to eat? Like how do I want to, like I'm making dinner tonight. What is my dream dinner? You know, and then I write recipes from there. So I feel like confidently I've never published anything that is like super not for me. And I genuinely pretty much like everything with the exception of bell peppers. Sweet potatoes are honestly not my favorite, and that is one of the exceptions. That is like a recipe that I write because people love sweet potatoes, and I respect you. And if you're not going to get a sweet potato recipe from me, you're going to get it from someone else. So I'd rather it come from me.
Totally fair. Thank you. I'm sorry we don't have bodegas.
You're welcome. You
No bodegas.
normal potatoes are good.
Thank you so much for being here today. We're very excited to be here. So that's actually a great timing question because my question was the opposite of that. Is there an ingredient that you think people don't use enough or that you like can't use enough in any recipe that you love and would recommend?
Not necessarily, but I will say that, you know, let me also preface this by saying I don't read the comment section of anything. Not YouTube, not the recipes, not anything. If people have an issue with something, if it doesn't work, if it's not functional, if there's a mistake, I hear about it from an editor and that's addressed. But if it's like an opinion or something that's going to like bring me down, I can't do it. So that said, there was like I heard through the grapevine, like when I use a lot of olive oil, people freak out. They're like, do you really need all that olive oil? I'm like, I don't know. I do. Use less. If you don't, I don't know. Like, don't let me tell you how to live your life. Like that is sort of the thing about recipe writing is like people read it and they're like, a third of a cup of Parmesan? Well, I never. It's like, well then don't. Like, I don't know. This isn't a rule book. It's not it's not a law manual. Like, feel free to add less. Lisa or whatever. Like, I guess like by and large, I wish people embraced things like fat and olive oil more. I don't cook with butter a ton, but when I do, I really mean it. And like, it's not the time to cut back because you think it's going to taste better. That's like with the stew and everyone's like, well, people were so upset when they're like, there's 2 cans of coconut milk in this. 2 cans? I was like, yeah, there's 2 cans. It also serves 6 people. Like, I'm not asking you to chug a can of coconut milk. I'm not a monster. And certain people edited that recipe to make the stew with 1 can, and they were happy with that, and that's great for them. That's not the recipe that I wrote. So people were like, but I think just like fat in general is something that I really embrace, that I love cooking with. It makes food taste really good, and I think done responsibly, like it can be incorporated into most people's lifestyles.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi. So you mentioned that you don't like when guests pick off your cutting board or linger in the kitchen. What is something that someone can do to be a delightful guest?
That is so nice. That's such a nice question. I also feel like that makes me sound like I like have people over but ask everyone to leave immediately. I'm like, yeah, come on. I'm like, oh, but you have to go in the other room. I don't want to talk to any of you. I don't know. I think just being like generally helpful. I am very fortunate to have a friend group that either loves to or loves to pretend like they love to clean. And just like without asking every time, like will help wash the dishes, like sometimes just do it themselves. One of my friends is here. She just loves to clean genuinely, I think, right? Okay. Yeah, she's very good at it too. And yeah, I think that like offering to help clean, even if the host says no, and you can take them at their word, will go so far. But just like that type of thing, it's not necessarily what you bring, it's how you behave when you're there. And it's like, how can I make your life easier after you've invited me to your home and you cooked for me? Does that mean like taking the trash out for you downstairs on my way out? Or like bringing paper towels if you ask me to, or, do you need anything? Can I get you a wine? Like, honestly, somebody just pouring me a glass of wine is a dream. There's nothing worse than being like knowing they're drinking good wine in the other room. And you're like, is there any more of that? And they're like, oh, we just finished. I'm like, no, I get the wine too. So, I'm just making sure that they feel taken care of, because I think oftentimes when you're hosting, it is a large output and can be emotionally exhausting to like nurture and take care of. So just like any person at the party or the dinner, just being like, hey, did you need anything? You good? Is helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So this kind of relates to that question, but it's weirdly contentious in my home with my husband. The debate over should you cook while you clean, and I'm hoping that you can settle that once and for all this evening. How do you do it?
I feel strongly that always. I think that you should clean as you go every time, and even if that means like stacking things. Yeah, I think that again, this comes from working in a restaurant. And every friend I have that also practices this, either at my home or elsewhere, we all clean as we go. Like people are always like, doesn't look like you just cooked for 10 people in here. I was like, yeah, because we're cleaning as we go.
Right.
And it just, not only does it make your life easier at the end of the night, it's like, I'm a lot less likely to clean at the end of a dinner party. But if I'm like, oh, it's just, the sheet pan that's soaking and like the dinner plates and the silverware, and that's it, because every other bowl, every other dish that I use to prep has already been cleaned. It doesn't seem that scary, and I can like wake up and take care of that. Yeah. But cleaning as you go will make everything so much easier. It's like brushing your teeth. Like, just do it every day. Like, just clean as you go, then you're not like dealing with an nightmare. That analogy I'm not sure works, but like, where it's like, don't let it build up. Just like take care of it as it happens. Yeah. And to, if somebody says, is there anything I can do to help? I'll be like, yeah, can you clear the sink? Like, can you just like wash those 3 bowls?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, my husband will be very happy that you said that.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Shit. I had a 50-50 chance of getting that right or wrong with you, but
thank you.
You don't have a dishwasher either, right?
I don't have a dishwasher.
Yeah, that's New York.
Yeah, I know. We love it there. It's great.
A dishwasher.
Hi. I love your food, but I also really, really love your natural wine and like entertaining alcohol recommendations. I'm like putting a bunch of pet nat in my bathtub because you told me to. What are you drinking? Anything that you're into these days?
What am I not drinking? So I've been on this book tour, and it has been extremely tough. Because it is just like a lot of drinking. I feel, and it's not like getting like drunk every night. It's just like, there were like times where I declined a glass of wine, which has like never happened to me in my life. But I tend to favor the same types of wine year round. I'm not like a seasonal wine drinker. Like rosé season does not exist for me. But I feel like as it gets colder, I do tend to like gravitate more towards red wine, but I still really want all my red wine chilled. So I like really light, like Gamay, Beaujolais style red wines that can be drank like pretty cold. And that to me is like a very nice thing to have in a cozy restaurant or your house or wherever. But yeah, I don't know. I think that like my relationship to drinking is so social, and like my friends and I all were like, oh, we're like excited about wines when we get together, and like, oh, who brought the whatever? Like people get pumped. I don't necessarily retain like the information because I'm not trying to buy that bottle again necessarily. It's more about the experience. And what I write about in the book is what I will always probably preach when it comes to wine is like find someone who knows about wine and ask them, because that's not me. And I don't want to pretend that I do, but I am curious and I want to learn, and I want to I like the conversation. I like going into the wine shop and being like, I really like this. Do you have anything like that? Or I always buy this bottle. Do you have anything like it that I haven't had before? Like constantly expanding your repertoire. It's not about like going in and getting the same thing, but it's about like trying new things. And sometimes you're like, oh, I liked the other one better, but I don't know. It's like a fun experience to always kind of have different bottles around that interest you. Yeah.
And I think we still have time for another question or two if someone wants to come up.
Do not be shy.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi. So we're the last stop on your book tour. The decade's wrapping up. You're getting into tie-dyeing a little bit. What's next for Alison Roman in 2020?
Oh my God! No. This is actually the last event for this year. So I'm gonna take so much time off, and by so much, it's like a week. I'm taking like a week off. I'm going to the dentist. That's gonna be fun. Yeah. I have a lot of things in the works in 2020. I'm trying not to think about them until January because a lot of things are still up in the air. They're like loosely taking shape, and it's like the annoying vague answer because like I can't talk about it yet. But it's all really exciting and hopefully just like an extension of what I do now. And it's interesting because the more I do, it's like video stuff and recipe writing and column and this and that. I know that without a doubt in my mind that I want to write cookbooks forever. It is like my greatest joy, and hopefully I can expand and do other things. That's on my radar and part of my plan. But I think that like, to me, it's such a deeply personal, fun project and unique, and everybody copies everybody these days, and it's really hard to like remain, like have like a singular vision or feel unique or like you're making a statement. And the way that we consume content is so like fleeting and it feels empty, but like books are like a real thing that you can hold and look through and connect with and spend time with. And there's so much work that goes into that like they cannot be duplicated. And to me, it's like one of the last beautiful things that you can make that's like a real unique object. So I hope that I can continue to do those for forever. And then with a bunch of other stuff too.
Well, we'll keep buying it.
Thank you. Thank you. I hope so.
All right, I think, we have maybe time for one more.
Okay.
Two? Okay. The rest of the line? Okay, we'll finish this line. All right.
So my question is, I constantly use you as an adjective. Like I'm like, oh, it's like Alison Roman meets neighborhood restaurant. It's Alison Roman meets steakhouse. And everyone immediately knows what I mean. So I'm curious if I ever wanted to not do that, how you would describe kind of your vibe or your food generally.
No pressure. No, I'm not going to be good at this. I don't know. I feel like you would have to. I feel like I have to ask you this question.
I think that's why I call it Alison Roman meets XYZ because I feel like you're very unique.
I don't know. I mean, like if you're thinking it in relation to food or vibe, like it's kind of like charmingly disheveled but like delicious. I don't know, like not right, but like we like her, you know, like still fun. I don't know. There's. I don't know. It's really interesting to like try to think about yourself that way. Cause it is just how I've been forever. And a lot of the things that like I may seem like fun outwardly or like actually make my life hell, but yeah, I don't know. Hopefully like fun. Is that like a fun steakhouse? Like a fun neighborhood? I don't know. That's like a horrible answer. I don't know.
I think it's all of the above. Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome. Thank you.
Hi. First of all, the sour cream Nutella situation on the hazelnut cake is insane, I would say.
Thank you.
Best thing so far. My question for you is a question I like to ask my friends. What's the best thing that you ate for you on your book tour and the worst?
The worst was probably anything I ate in or around an airplane or airport. Yeah. Anything involving air travel. I would, again, rather not eat. But that wasn't really an option.
I feel the same.
I had some bad experiences. And the best thing I ate, gosh, I don't know. I had a lot of really great food. I also did a bad job of like going out for dinner or meals for pleasure. So like they were either like work related or I was like at one of my own events. So I ate a lot of my own food from this book. And, that's probably not the answer because like I ate it so many times. I like can't even remember where I was 4 weeks ago. I would say London is my favorite food city in the world right now. I love it there. And I think it's so funny because I think like growing up, like there was like a stereotype that the food in London was bad or the British food was bad. But I think that they are so thoughtful in their restaurant design and in their wine lists and their wine bars. And they're so casual, but thoughtful. And the food is delicious. And it's a lot of like simple salads and like beautifully cooked fish. And I don't know, I had such good food when I was there. There's a restaurant called Flor, Flor, that was like kind of blew me away. It was just like the perfect little restaurant.
Love that. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay, last question.
I'm so honored. I know that you said you do your own food styling. I love all the dishes that you have in your book. Are those yours, and do you like to collect them? How do you collect them? How do you acquire?
So I work with a prop stylist.
Okay.
So I do the food styling, and then I have somebody who does prop styling.
Okay.
And the way that this works for me with both of my books is I'd say like 50% rented or loaned, and then 50% is mine.
Okay.
And that's either stuff that I've already had or stuff that I've purchased for the shoots. Like we work with a mood board and a vision board, and I'm like, I want to use a lot of like this color pattern and like this texture thing, and like being very thoughtful about each thing. Like it's, I like preach a lot about like authenticity and all this stuff, but there is a lot about a book that is like premeditated. It just, even in color palette, we're like, we're going to work with these colors. But then we like set up these big long tables and we set everything out by color. And so when we're like, oh, let's try and plate this on this plate, that would be cool. And then we're like, we take a photo and we're like, it doesn't work. Let's flip it to another, color or shape or whatever. So I spend a lot of time on eBay and a lot of time on Etsy. Most of the things, especially the things that I find very special, are all vintage and sourced from the internet or flea markets. I spend a lot of time, like any city I go to, if there's an antique market or a flea market or anything in that vein, I make an effort to go to, just because I feel like that's where you find good stuff. People are always like, where'd you get those bowls? I'm like, in like a weird barn in North Carolina. But honestly, if I see something that I like elsewhere, I will also Google like clear plastic orange bowl or whatever and see what comes up. And even if it's not the bowl that I thought I wanted, maybe it's like another bowl that I like. So when people, like if you ever see something and you're like, oh, I want to get bowls or plates like that, like literally just Googling or going on Etsy and typing in like pink glass tray. Yeah. There's a lot of cool stuff out there. And I like buying old stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you everyone for coming out, and thank you, Allison.
Thank you so much.
Thank you to Allison and Jessica. What a wonderful